we're going to be talking about queering patriarchy, and obviously a very Gregory, I really appreciated it when you said like that the patriarchy would not survive queering. So I wanted to repeat that and just share like what our hope is. To put it in Buddhist terms, our hope is that as we talk about patriarchy, that it becomes another like Dharma gate or door to see through or metabolize the poisons of greed and hatred and delusion, and to start to or continue to kind of envision like or what a world post-patriarchy looks like, and how that although patriarchy is not sustainable and ending, like how have we internalize those qualities though as we build something more whole? What ways are we carrying those mental formations and have internalized these so a dominator system basically, yeah. Gregory, how would you define patriarchy?
So I've seen patriarchy defined as a system, a hierarchical system that elevates some men over other men and all men over women. But I'm sure many of you have noticed that that definition of patriarchy already presupposes a binary, right? And so it's important to note that the binary itself is a primordial act of patriarchy, is forming that binary as a precourse to, that word, precourse? To domination, setting up a system of hierarchy and domination, right? So basically, I would define patriarchy as a system of domination that uses the concept of gender to justify forms of domination.
Yeah, and yeah, what do we learn? You know, we've had so many conversations about patriarchy, how patriarchy shows up in our interpersonal relationships, right? Um, our relationship and with others and within our families, and how yeah, what I've learned a lot was about when I came out and being part. So my family, many of you know, my maternal side is from traditional like El Salvadoran collectivist Christian culture, and so when I came out, it was a front to patriarchy. And although I grew up really in a raised by all women, that the the sense of following traditional gender roles was a reason for family to exclude me from being a full human, as like a full part of this family that I was born into, you know. And so I've learned that every time I'm coming out, because as all of you I know, like the coming out process is like it's constant, right? And that I'm pushing against like thousands of years of conditioning, and Um, yeah, and so what would you say you've learned, Gregory, from the work you're doing? Specifically like around with white folks. I'll just go there. Yeah, around patriarchy.
Sure, I can start there. I mean, that's really what brought me to looking at patriarchy, is because I started out doing work with the Untraining. I'm still part of the Untraining White Liberal Racism program, and noticing that in the classes and workshops that we hold, there's a remarkable paucity of men showing up to do that work, which is, basically it's internal work, right? It's not organizing protests in the street or whatever. And so there's something about that kind of work that isn't bringing in men. They're not seeing the value in it. They're not, I mean, I was there somehow, but, being queer sort of shifted my relationship to that a little bit. But just exploring both among men I knew and within myself, what was getting in the way. And what I noticed was masculine conditioning was what was getting in the way of being even ready to actually do that kind of internal excavation that's required to look at whiteness. So first we got to go through like the layers of masculinity to get to the layers of whiteness. And it's not, either or, but there's an element of that to it. And then when I started doing a little men's work, what I noticed right away is it's hard to get us in the room, but once we get in the room, we're really anxious to have that conversation and to open up in that way. I've noticed that over and over again.
Yeah. I have too, and we've done some men's work together, and and so I want to show the slide that we prepared, to start to talk about this uh, binary, and so a binary of masc and femme, and Gregory and I got into a conversation this morning about the word arbitrary, and so finding the nuance about like how these categories are arbitrary, like they're put in this either or, and that they have real consequences in our in how we're suppressed and not allowed to express the fullness of our humanity. And so kind of the masc side of things, the qualities we came up with was protect, provide, and punish. That these are qualities that are assigned to masc identified or to essentialize the masc identity, and then femme is that's related to these words of like nurture, hold, and relate, and so just what comes up with you for you, Gregory, is looking at this slide. And
Yeah, well, a couple of things I would say is, just to reinforce that everything on both sides of this chart, or whatever you want to call it, are qualities of every whole human being. Like everybody has all these qualities. And so the division is arbitrary in that sense. We split up the qualities of a whole human being into a gendered binary. And then we value the ones on the left side of that division. And that the point of this split is really to justify, again, that domination thing, right?
And hierarchy, and who's
Yeah,
less human, who's more human, who's, I'm looking
right.
at this risk taking and safety binary, and yeah, how much I internalize misogyny and homo antagonism, homophobia. And so I was both, said that this is the right way to be, and to be risk taking, where, but to a point where I wasn't, I was internalizing that same thing of like that I'm not, I'm less than, right, because I'm queer. Yeah. Um, and how, um, safety was seen as something that, that wasn't, that I didn't deserve, or that I didn't, yeah, and that I didn't, and that would never, yeah, it was just a contradiction that I needed to take care of myself, but I was, yeah, not allowed to, like on some fundamental level, because that would be seen as weak, or, um, yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking right at this moment as I look at this about how, for me, growing up queer, I felt like I had to pick the ones I could like fake my way into, um, because I couldn't, the other ones I couldn't do. Like, there was no aggression. I don't have any capacity for like being a fighter or whatever. And I was a weakling and bad at sports. Um, but I could be rational, right? So I grabbed onto that like reason thing and like arguing. And my dad argued with me all the time anyway. So that was one of the things that was rewarded, was being able to argue back, right? Even if he never let me win. And then stoic. Stoic's always handy. Like, just don't cry, don't admit you're in pain, don't ask for help. Um,
Right.
right.
Yeah. And I see the expressive on the other side of Stoic, like how we're not allowed to be expressive in our bodies, how much, as Sonia Renee Taylor uses this term of body terrorism, right? That we're not allowed to express ourselves, that it, the restrictions of don't walk this way, wear this, don't talk like that, um, that Stoicism is kind of to shut that down in a way, and, that obviously is really, yeah, really, there's so much grief, um, yeah, that I connect to on the regular, where I grieve those times that still come to me, these memories of moments in my life where I wasn't allowed to be expressive, or to, be in my body. Yeah. Um, yeah, that was really with the meditation, that coming from my heart of like thanking ourselves, and like giving ourselves permission to be with our bodies as they are, so, um, it's hella queer to do that.
Yeah. Speaking of queer, I just want to also underscore like the last thing on the, well, I want to underscore two things. One is that none of these things are bad on either side of the chart. They just need to be in context. Anybody can express any of these things in context, right? So there's times when you need to be strong, and everybody of every gender is capable of being strong and aggressive and rational and um, cooperative and dependent and expressive and all of that, right? But the other thing I wanted to underscore is that the last thing on the left-hand side, the homophobia and misogyny, is just to highlight that the energies of the things on the left in their extreme are afraid of and hateful of the things on the right. Hateful of because they're afraid of, right? So like hyper masculinity hates weakness, hates passivity, hates queerness most of all, right? And is terrified of it, threatened by it.
Yeah. 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 And to put it within like the Buddhist context, like Buddhism was created of non-Buddhist elements, is what Thich Nhat Hanh says, but within the context of patriarchy. And so that's a big other topic. And what keeps me coming back to these teachings is that I know that we can use these teachings to continue to deconstruct and heal. And one of the places I've gotten stuck in, it's like in my practice, is to try to get rid of aspects that are natural to our humanity. So I appreciate it, Gregory, you pointing out that there aren't, within these contexts, like these are all aspects of being human, and how within the context, as you said, is where we can bring wisdom and compassion or harm, and violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of other binaries, and those aren't clear binaries. I was with harm and violence is the sense of like, well, that's patriarchal, and it's like, well, okay, and that's like part of this existence, like, and how are we reducing harm? And that's one of the teachings I take from Buddhism. It's really at the heart of it is like, how do we reduce harm, knowing that harm is a part of life, and and yeah, and we come to these teachings like really seeing how that those harms live within us, and how not to amplify the harm, because in that way it is replicating these patterns of patriarchal masculinity or patriarchal domination and hierarchy. So
Yeah.
you, yeah,
Are we gonna go to the other slide, or are we gonna
yeah, so there's some comments here. We want to ask folks, what binaries are you, I want to say, to come back to the theme of like bringing you alive, but what's like really bringing you a lot of attention? Like what binaries in your life are really calling for, um, calling your attention? Yeah, Gregory, that was kind of what we,
yeah, especially binaries that maybe feel like they have something to do with power. Not like wet or dry, but like, binaries that feel like they're about power. Because we were transitioning into like there's a broader set of binaries to think about that we maybe don't often think about in that way.
yeah, yeah. So we came up with a list as well, and so I'm gonna show that. And so man, you mentioned one of them, yeah, so yeah, this mask femme, straight, queer, cis, trans, top, bottom, binary, non-binary, healthy, sick, thin, fat, reasonable, emotional, enlightened, ignorant. Gregor, do you want to go to this kind of category? We clumped these, yeah, in a way that was,
they're grouped in some way, but you can guess. I don't know. Mind, body, white, POC, civilized, indigenous, spirit, matter, good, evil, order, chaos.
yeah. So yeah, looking at binaries as a way that dominator culture, patriarchy divides and conquers us, right? This is, and from our own mind and body, right? And then from each other. And,
Right.
yeah.
And I think the last one on that list, the order chaos, is somehow really fundamental because protecting the binaries and this sort of split is really fundamental to dominator culture. And that's what passes for order. Anything that's like a different order would be seen as chaos from the perspective of the power up side, you know?
Right, right. Yeah, which explains the, and does not justify, but explains the, just all the attacks on our rights, as queer folks, right? And the constant struggle um, to push back against those, and to and yeah,
Yeah, there's a way that the energy's on the right side of that. It's unfortunate the left and right, the way they came out on the chart, but the energies on the right side of that are the gateways to liberation almost uniformly. I mean, maybe not evil. I'm not sure where evil fits in here, but I don't believe in evil. But all these other ones are crashing through the order that the dominator culture depends on to create something new.
you like to, unless there's a last minute comment, we will just we will dedicate the merit. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, through the merit that has been accrued by this time we've spent together this evening, learning together, may all beings find more awakening, more peace, and more liberation.
Everyone, so thank you for your practice. Thanks for all the ways. Yeah. All the ways we're queer. Thank you.